the male sexual abuse, it happens not just at a different age. It doesn't seem to happen with as much frequency. It seems like statistically we look at about 1 out of 9 males getting sexually abused before they get through their adolescence that can report it. But there's so much of that abuse that just gets unreported, unacknowledged. And when a person's sexually abused, the core of who they are is being touched, and it does affect. People get more compulsive. They get more compulsive about cleanliness, neatness, clothes sometimes, hand washing. There's more dissociation that goes with a person who's been sexually abused. It also takes, less sexual abuse to produce more shame in a person than it does like emotional or physical abuse. Sexual abuse is a more highly shaming kind of abuse, where you end up, with the shame. And I have some fears generally about our society because we have an offender protective society. Well, first of all, when abuse victims report abuse, that 60% of professional statements made back to victims of sexual abuse are offender-oriented. They say things like, what were you doing at the time? What were you wearing? Why didn't you tell anybody? Why didn't you leave? Why didn't you fight for yourself? I don't believe that really happened. All this stuff is offender-oriented statements, and that further shames the abuse victim. And part of the, what happens is that there's an event. And then there's also a secret. The event affects a person, but the secret impacts their life. And then sometimes they break the secret and they disclose it, but then when they're not believed or when it's turned back on them, they pull in again and they don't trust some more. The secret affects a person's life in some ways as much as the abuse itself sometimes. It's like the secret controls relationships, why the secret is kept. Usually an abuse victim is made to know why they have to keep the secret. It's like if I abuse my daughter and I say, if you tell anybody this, it'll kill your mother. It'll break her heart. So she won't tell anybody this, but from then on she's a caretaker. And she can't share a reality in case it'll ever hurt anybody else. Or if you tell anybody this, I'll beat you up so badly, that you'll wish you'd never told anybody or I'll kill you. And then her life in relationships are wrought with that fear of physical punishment or being killed. And sometimes that's one of the things where she'll hang around with violent people as a way of kind of making that make sense to her. If you tell anybody this, no one will believe you, or they'll take you away or put you away. And so then the fear of sharing her reality from then on, or sharing herself in relationships, is that she'll be put away and not believed. And you see this, so the secret controls the life. The part I said about protecting offenders in our society, we do let offenders off regularly. But sometimes when we don't let them off, we incarcerate. And that, I'm not saying we protect offenders really, we protect the offender system. And incarceration is a protection of the offender system when there's no treatment involved. And what incarceration very often does is it increases the offender orientation of the person rather than decreases. And I can tell you even how to create an offender, not just sex, but also physical violence. The way to create an offender is to create a victim and have that victim identify or bond with the aggressor. See, Hitler is a case in point. Hitler was a victim of child abuse who was forced to love and respect and obey, his father. Alice Miller is writing about this, and she's from Germany and she's a family therapist, and she studied Hitler and she studied a lot of the Nazis involved, and she's found that most of them were abuse victims that bonded with their aggressor. Now, given Hitler's other peculiar isolation issues and personality, he became a mass offender. Even in concentration camps, where the Jewish people that collaborated with the Nazis and they became like offenders with the Nazis, well, what they found was that those are Jewish people who didn't have a sense of their Jewishness or a bonding in the Jewish community, and so they identified with the aggressors and became aggressors. The part that's scary in our society is that we don't protect kids, that kids get abused, and some of those bond with the offenders and they become offenders. And that one offender can make several offenders, and that I think you can have a potentially, and probably do have, an expanding offender system when you have an offender protective system. And if you look at some of the major movements in our society, and I think I'm going to say like the moral majority movement is a movement that wants to lessen child protection laws, which are virtually innocuous in most states and unenforceable, already. And if you lessen those, what protection do kids have? Already we work with kids and can't get kids out of families, and and kids are getting abused, and it gets thrown out by the courts, and it's already tough to protect children. There are some people that maintain that this is the most dangerous place on earth, the United States, for children. And others maintain, they go on to say, that it's in the history of mankind, we are the most abusive society in how we treat our children. That was hard for me because I always thought maybe like industrial England, kids with their little lunch buckets going off to 9 years old, going off to 12-hour days in factories and stuff. I thought that would be the most abusive society. No, they're saying that the United States is, that we neglect, we don't provide available dental medical care. We abuse, we use sexually, physically, we molest our kids more frequently in this country than anywhere else. Now, I don't know. I don't know if anybody has the real statistics to back that up comparatively. So I won't even get into comparative. The reality is that our society hurts kids. Kids get hurt in families, and that the offenders that we protect the most often, and the offender system we protect the most often, are parents. And that we have a consensus theory about parenting that just doesn't work. That we believe certain things about parents that isn't true, and that parents have a certain approach to their kids and their rights with their kids that just isn't real. And our kids get hurt by that, and sexually and physically and emotionally demolished virtually by what parents do to their kids and get away with in our society, and some of that is even society's norms, and I'm convinced that it's norms. It's a cultural consensus that we have to break because it's not working. And it's not working because what we're dying of is disease of lifestyle. It's not, disease in the sense that we used to think of it. We get inoculated and vaccinated for those things. Now we're killing ourselves because we can't eat properly, rest properly, exercise properly, deal with our feelings. That's what's killing us now. So it's clear that there's something wrong that's not teaching, so that we can't have a healthy lifestyle. And what's wrong is we're getting hurt in our families. And it's big. It's a lot bigger than many of us care to even look at or realize. The offender system is that offenders don't know how to have their feelings, and they've bonded with this person that's shown them. They don't want their feelings, so they kind of give their feelings, they project them on other people, and then the offender walks away, sort of released to the feeling, and what does the victim feel like? They feel the shame, the disgust, the anger, the fear, and the sadness that the offender had, and the offender's given it to the victim. And that's basically the offender system. So I believe that the key is not us getting rid of our feelings. In some ways, that's like an offender system. The key is to embrace and feel our feelings and own them and get them in perspective and learn to share them with others, but not to project them on others. My dad was always projecting and giving us his feelings, and so I had the shame and the rage and the fear that he didn't really own. He owned the rage, but he still projected that on us. The key is having our feelings. There's a lot about sexual abuse and what happens to sexual abuse victims, and can't scratch the surface, in a couple hours. It's enough to know that it tears a person's inside out. Sexuality is the core of my identity, who I am as a man, and when I get sexually abused, it messes up my relationship with myself as a man, messes up my relationships with men, and messes up my relationships with women. And then I get into a lot of compensating kinds of things to cover that, to deny it. I might get into acting out like an offender. I might get into hurting myself. I might get into sexual compulsion. I might get into a lot of things. The key is that it has a massive impact on our life. And if we don't remember the event, how do we deal with it? Well, I believe that our bodies remember what our minds don't. And they remember usually by way of the feelings that are there. And so even as you're thinking about incest or sexual abuse or people in your life, and you start to feel, the nausea, the tightness in the stomach, the fear response, that your body is telling you that maybe something happened. My belief is, that, and it's not something I recommend that you do right now or do alone, but in a therapeutic process, you can go into the feelings, allow those feelings to be real, even sometimes give those feelings words, and a lot of times the memory connects automatically to the feelings. In fact, sometimes even in the words it opens up the memory. But you can trust your feelings even if you never get the exact memory. Even if it's an infant issue, the feelings are there. In fact, you know that from 0 to 5 years old, children that are gently, genitally stimulated will often get into projectile vomiting as a result of their disgust and rage and nausea at their being abused. And this is gentle genital stimulation. Now, a lot A lot of incest is gentle, and a lot of it is stimulating, a lot of it feels good, and sometimes the victim wants it to happen, but it's also painful and scary and overwhelming and traumatic. Always see it as traumatic. And sometimes the memory is gone, and sometimes the memory is there, but its impact on our life, it still has that grip on a person's life. I believe that it's important to make it real, whether you come to it through memories and talking about it, or through a process of looking at the feelings and owning the feelings and letting them have expression. It's important to make it real because the reality of it can give us a chance to make changes in our life, especially in relationship with self and others and trust of self and others. Especially in, incest victims very often feel like they're damaged goods. They feel like something's wrong with them even though they don't know what it is. And a lot of times, there's sleeplessness involved in their lives. There's sexual dysfunction and disorders, and I can go on for a long time with this. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them about the sexual abuse. But I think I also need to spend some time with the physical violence in families. Any questions?
Is there as of yet a clear definition of sexual abuse? You raised the point that it's hard to do.
Yes.
What's a working definition?
A working definition of sexual abuse? When there's a power differential, and when someone with more power is abusing or touching or looking at or exposing self to, or making, shaming, crummy, intrusive remarks to someone else that is sexual, in nature, then that's sexual abuse. You're using someone else to gratify or take care of an addiction, and in that using, there's a control issue, and there's an inappropriateness to it. Okay? But the power differential is what makes it abuse. Like kids will, you show me mine, I'll show you yours, or show me yours, I'll show you mine. I don't know how it works. Show me mine, I can't, I don't care. Show me anybody. But, with kids that they have, like there's no power differential, that isn't sexual abuse, but if one is bigger and older, then that is sexual. Sibling incest occurs. Now, and sometimes that's sexual abuse, but also sibling incest doesn't very often occur in systems unless there's severe neglect in the system already, or there's other sexual addiction or acting out in the system. So if one, like if a parent is a sex addict, and acting out, then the siblings may act out that denial. Or if there's already incest, then siblings may also act out incestuously. But there is this, other stuff that isn't abusive, that's just natural curiosity. But kids have a pretty good sense of boundaries about relationships with others, and how far to go with that curiosity, unless they're victims of neglect or abuse, or there's abuse in the family or addiction. Offenders, about 23% prey on strangers, about 50-some% prey on people they know, and about 20% prey on their own families. And I don't know how many offenders we've got. It's hard to say. And there is a correlation. Even one study showed that 50% of all, or 49% of all incest fathers in this study were alcoholics. There's a correlation between the sexual abuse and sexual crimes and alcoholism, very high one. I think that study was low, but I think a lot of the victims of an alcoholic father who sexually abuses them, repress the memory, they don't look at it, and it's like incidental stuff, or it's older stuff, or it's different stuff. Like dad gets funny when he dances, or when he's drunk, he wants to dance with me, he gets kind of fresh, and he slides his hand down my back, or stuff like that. And we don't see that that's sexual abuse. Well, it is. Okay. Violence, yes. Marilyn?
Well, the males, then, the 13 to 16-year-olds, is the group most sexually abused. Does penetration have to take place? Same example?
Oh, no. Penetration, the question is, does penetration have to take place for it to be abusive in a male? Penetration doesn't have to take place for it to be incest or sexual abuse in anybody. It can be the touch, it can be the innuendo, it can be the exposed to. It doesn't. I mean, you can have sexual abuse without even sexual touch. Okay, and sometimes it doesn't even feel sexual, or it's not supposed to look sexual, but it feels sexual. It can be sexual abuse. How you're kissed, even how you're hugged, how you're looked at. I mean, comments made about yourself. All right, family violence. There's a guy that wrote a book. His name is Gellis, called Violence in America. And family violence is another one of those issues. We sweep it under the rug. We don't look at how massive it is, and it affects so many people. Family violence in the United States, there's like 10 million victims of violence every year in the United States. And they figure about 6 million are severely affected by it or seriously impacted by it. I can make a correlation between family violence and crime in the streets, safety in our cities, war, the atrocities of war. There's a correlation. I don't know if any of you are worried about violence on TV. Anybody here worried about? Huh? You're worried about it? Okay. I am a little, but not as much as I might be, because I see TV as the family media. And what does the family media do? Well, it reflects family. And it reflects what families are about to a large extent. And I don't think that those powers that be really control the media as much as they like to think and that we think. I think that what we get with our institutions, our media, our schools, is a reflection of what we want and what's going on in our society. And admittedly, things like that change slower than sometimes our families do, but I'm not so sure if that's even true. All right. And so it's family violence that set up, I think, TV violence. In fact, we got to look at families having a negative impact on TV, not TV having that's a little bit reversed, right? All right. Family violence, the crime. Most criminals are victims of family violence, but a lot of people that work with criminals do not see it. And why? Because criminals are offenders. And offenders generally do not see the victimization that they've experienced in their family of origins. They deny that. What they tend to do is they feel victimized by the police, by the therapist, by whoever caught them, by their present family, but they don't, they protect their families. And they say, yeah, my dad used to beat me, but, if he didn't, I don't know really how bad I would have gotten, and I used to get in a lot of trouble. And that's what they say. They don't see it as victimization, so they don't own it. But I know that victimization is a part of that setup and for being an offender. In fact, that's one of the responses to victimization, is become an offender. And so it's like just the fact that we aren't safe in our cities anymore. Runaways are about family violence. In fact, 80% of all prostitutes were sexually abused in their own home in one study. And most runaways were either sexually or physically abused, and if not, severely neglected or put in emotional double binds and stuff. Kids don't run away from healthy families, even though we like to think of it. There's a correlation between this stuff and alcoholism. Now, about 1 out of 3 families, I guess, have violence, and about 1 out of 8 women, it seems, have been beaten by their husbands. You know what the rule of thumb means? The rod with which you use to beat your spouse can be no thicker than the width of your thumb. Kids get beaten. It's just not unusual for violence to occur in families. I think it's possible to physically discipline kids. Right? I believe that's a possibility. And sometimes I even, believe in, I don't think I can, my kids, because I come from that violent stuff, and I know that it's impossible for me to really sort out that system and my rage from, spanking kids. So I won't spank my own kids. But I think that other parents can, and it can be respectful and done in a way that is not abusive. How many of you got spanked, whipped, disciplined, beaten, hit, somehow slapped, as a kid? How many? Let me see all your hands. Okay, it looks like most. Almost, not quite everybody. How many of you have seen it as physical abuse? Okay, I'd say that we're down up quite a bit. About 20% of those that got whipped. See, and I think that actually, you may hate me for this, but I think that at least 60% of you are wrong. That what happened to you, statistically, as far as I'm concerned anyway, was physical abuse, and you haven't looked at it as physical abuse. Okay? Not okay. Get this guy out of here. Who wants to go to another workshop like this and find out? Well, I'm going to explain why I think that. First of all, I don't think parents hit kids because of kids' behavior. Parents hit kids because the kids irritate the parents. It's not because of the behavior. And when you hit kids out of your irritation, that's usually abuse. It's not helping the kid. A couple of the rules. Obviously, you look at severity. And if something is used, I do a workshop on how to discipline children, right? And we're in this workshop, and I'm talking about natural consequences, and I'm talking about isolation and all this stuff, and I ask for volunteers. And now we're going to talk about the belt theory, okay? So I would like volunteers to come up and let me demonstrate using the belt on children. Who would volunteer? No volunteers, huh? Why not? I mean, it's even absurd to think that you'd volunteer. Why wouldn't you volunteer for getting hit with a belt? Painful as all hell, isn't it? It really, either end of the belt hurts like crazy. See, and that's what we do to our kids to help them improve their behavior? That's pretty bizarre, I think. Sometimes it is, anyway. Most of the time, probably. Boards are used on kids. They get hit with 2x4s. You know, they say, oh, yeah, I was disciplined, but, you know, it's a good thing, because if I weren't disciplined by my dad with that 2x4, I might have ended up in jail or stealing a car. You know, and in fact, someone said that once, just like that, and I said, well, did you ever steal a car? He thought, oh, yeah, I did steal a car. No. You know, a friend of mine and I went out and stole, you know, and he has been in jail, and, you know, so, but we miss it. First, and the other thing is that the violence usually in a family is encapsulated more on one member of the family than other members of the family. There's usually that scapegoat role. But that doesn't, whenever there's violence in the family, the whole family is victimized by the violence. Any of you witnessed violence that you weren't hit? Anybody besides me? Yeah? And you know, you're a victim of that violence just as sure and as much as if you were hit yourself. Sometimes it's even harder to witness it, you know, than to be hit. Sometimes. Anyway, the thing I say, severity and frequency. If it's frequent, then you're not helping the child improve the behavior. You know, and if it doesn't help the child improve the behavior, then it's abuse. If it's done to take care of the parent's feelings instead of to help the child improve behavior, it's abuse. I think that, you know, inconsistency, it's abuse. Now, I'll tell you, like, why I would hit my kids, okay? I come home, and let's say that it's a normal day, and everything's kind of going okay, and the milk is left out. Well, what on a normal day will I do with the milk when I see it left out? Put the milk away. Okay. Now, let's say that I've done that 19 times, but oh God, you know, I had a rough flight from Dallas. I land, my boss calls me, I'm having a fight with this person, and all of a sudden I see the milk left out. What am I going to do? Who the hell left the milk out? I told you 1,000 times to put this milk away, and you never do it, you know, and then spank, or slap, or push, or drag, or shove, right? Well, that's what we do. You know that Gillis found that 73% of parents admitted that they had kicked, pushed, shoved, beaten their kid? And 63% in the last 12 months? It's not unusual. And these are the ones that are admitting it. It's not unusual to do that, is it? No, we do that. Maybe even if we don't shake them, we verbally attack them and scare them. Okay, so what did we just do? Well, what we just did was we said something different about the 20th time than the other 19, and we don't like that. That's a discrepancy. You know what I'm going to do? And you know what? They're the other 19 times I didn't say anything, and this is for them, and I'm just trying to do it, and now I'm going to start lying. I'm going to tell them 2 or 3 of the great lies of the universe. I'm going to say, and I'm doing this for your own good, so you learn respect and responsibility, and this hurts me more than it hurts you. Got 2 lies in there. That's not true. Neither one of those is true. The third lie that we don't say is the check is in the mail. So, you know, I mean, that doesn't fit in that particular setting. So, but we'd say that too if we wanted to. But the fact is that we have been physically abusing that kid under the guise of taking care of him. They believe that there's something wrong with them and not with us. In fact, if you're a kid, isn't it safer to think, I'm okay? No, it's not safer. That the parent is okay, but there's something wrong with me. Because if you're a kid and your life is in your parents' hands and they're crazy, you're in big trouble. But if your life is in parents' hands, you think they're okay, but something wrong with you, they'll still take care of you maybe. See, and so we make it about ourselves, and we're told it's about ourselves, but I don't think it is. Well, you know, you might go no hot or don't cross the street, but every time you get the kid to the corner, you beat him up, or you start beating the kid to teach him not to hit his sister. Now that doesn't make any sense, does it? You know, it's a little trick there. I've got a question for you. How many of you are hard on yourselves? Come on, be honest. How many are hard on yourselves? Do you know there's a direct correlation between being physically abused and being hard on yourselves? And there's also about the same number of hands raised for both questions. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? Anybody in here have a tendency to deny your physical pain? To not deal with pain? You know, like you pull a muscle and you don't take care of it very well. How many of you do that? How many? You know, see, that's another consequence sometimes of being physically beaten. That you learn to detach and dissociate from your own physical pain. And in fact, I don't know if anybody has a bad back in here, but I correlate bad back sometimes with how people are treated in their families physically, and that if you learn that, you know, like if you're spanked and you learn to dissociate from your physical pain and you pick something up and you strain a muscle, what are you supposed to do with a strained muscle? Rest it, of course. And how many of you don't rest it? You keep picking things up, and pretty soon what do you have? You have a bad back. And it's about being able to disconnect from pain that being physically abused can very well set up. And anybody here have a nasty mood infliction? It's like this wave that rolls over you, and sometimes you just want to lay it on someone. You yell verbally, physically, whatever. That nasty mood inflection is also another part sometimes of being abused. And that you can't stand there and stop a wave, can you? The thing washes over you. Best thing I know is to dig a channel and turn it back to where it came from. And a lot of times I have clients write, say, call. In fact, a friend of mine talks about how she had a client, every time you lift your hand to hit that kid, you call your dad. And you say, Dad, I was just about to hit my son, and I remembered that it was about how often you hit me, and I just wanted to tell you that so I don't hit him. Happy Father's Day, catch you later. Right? Oh, yeah. Send you a card in the mail. Well, but that anything to stop that behavior being turned, because what we do is we turn it down into our own families instead of turning it back to where it comes from. We have this national parent protection racket. We have this fourth commandment that says, not honor thy father and mother, because honor has to do with honesty. It's protect thy father and mother from any of our reality. And when we protect, what else do we do? What's the problem that aged people have? What's their biggest problem? Yeah, when we protect, we neglect. We can't even be around them. We can, how many people don't want to visit, talk to their parents because they're protecting them and they can't talk about the reality or what happened and they've been hurt. And sometimes, you neglect parents because they're so abusive. If you do talk about it, that you can't talk about it, and so it's easier. But sometimes it's not even about that. It's just about that we don't deal with the reality and we can't be around them. To protect is to neglect, and so it hurts everybody. And to protect them means we project it onto our own children or the people around us. And some of the most wonderful, nicest people in the world are horribly abusive in their own family systems. Did you know that? In fact, sometimes those of us that got hurt in our families feel crazy, right? Because everybody says, oh, you have such a wonderful father. Oh, your dad gives anybody the shirt off his back. He's the nicest guy I've ever met. Anybody ever get that? You get home, this guy's screaming and raging, you feel crazy. Well, the Maoris have a saying. It's a tribe in New Zealand, and I love the saying. It says, never judge a man by how he behaves outside of his own hut. Isn't that beautiful? You see, the true test is how we are with those people immediately close to us. That's the key of who we are, not how we behave, because a lot of us can put on a lot of false image about who we are. That's the test.